things have been cleared up and decided, Dan Malloy is Connecticut's governor-elect. He's here to talk about the really tough job ahead. Also, Tom Foley is going to be joining us to talk about the election confusion and what his next step will be. You're watching The Real Story. I'm Lori Perez. Connecticut has one governor-elect, after a tumultuous few days of election controversy. In the end, though, the numbers ended any confusion. And today, Dan Malloy is the victor. He is here now to talk about the road ahead. Thanks, Dan, for being here.
Great to be here.
Joining us in the discussion is also reporter Christine Stewart of Connecticut News Junkie and Pat Scully of The Hanging Shed. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
I'll let Pat, you can start off our questioning.
Well, Mr. Governor-elect, I've seen you since the election. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I also noticed that your transition includes your ties.
Yeah.
You wore green ties throughout the entire campaign. So anyway, I thought I'd represent.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll tell you the story about that. I started where we cleared a big hurdle on April 30th, which is we had completed raising $250,000 at $100 or less contributions. So the next day we announced that. That was the first day of the green tie exclusive that ran. The original plan was to have it run through the convention. Then the convention turned out pretty well, so I went through the primary. The primary turned out pretty well. I went to the general, and even on the 3rd of November, wore a green tie. Now I'm going back to my normal wardrobe. We'll circulate them.
Well, I've got a whole closet full.
But in a nice little note, you said you have a good plan for some of those ties.
Yeah, I'm taking the ties that I wore during that cycle and giving them to charity for charity auctions. So the guys at a radio station, PLR, are going to auction off one of the ties. Actually, I promised them either the one I wore at convention or primary night. So I got to figure out what I'm going to give them.
Excellent. Very nice. All right.
As far as a serious question, yesterday the current governor, Jody Well, talked briefly about the budget situation. Now, I know because you talked about it at such length, you're well prepared for the fiscal mess that we have and have a plan to address it. But did it bother you that the governor said, I'm handing off a balanced budget?
Well, I mean, clearly, first of all, I don't know what I'm getting. I had expected that I would receive a budget document, so in essence, a real budget. Apparently, I'm not going to receive that on Monday. What I'm going to receive is a summary of I guess, calculations of where we are. And until I get to see that document, it's hard for me to prejudge it. But it clearly is not going to be a budget. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to get. We'll pick it up. We know that the state is in a very bad condition. We know that we're looking at a tremendously large deficit situation, representing probably $3.4 billion in deficit. Somebody's got to straighten that out. We've decided that it goes to the next governor, and I happen to be the next governor. So we're going to have to figure this thing out, work between myself and an incoming administration and the legislature to get to the point where we have a balanced budget.
Does it make things more difficult, though? I mean, when you talk about it, without some new revenue, you're either going to have to destroy the contracts with the unions, devastate state services, and pass along a huge property tax increase to the local cities and towns.
Listen, if we laid off every state employee on the first day of the budget and didn't rehire them to the last day of the state budget, we'd still be in deficit. Right. So there is no easy way out of this thing. This is. It took us years to get to this point. I mean, one of the things that I always talk about, and it's tremendously boring, but we're going to change how we account for our expenses. Generally accepted accounting principles will be the law of the state of Connecticut by next spring. I'll execute an executive order on the first day of that I'm governor that will require all commissions, agencies, and departments to report to me under GAAP. I will sign no state budget until GAAP has become the law of the state of Connecticut, and we're going to go from there. So we're going to be transparent. We're going to talk the same language. People are going to know how bad things are. This is really ugly right now. We haven't told ourselves the truth. We've pretended we were in surpluses when we weren't in surpluses. We're going to change this.
Let me tell you, but speaking of telling the truth, you often along the campaign trail said, I'm being honest. I'm not going to say that we're not going to have taxes. That was one of your, lines along the campaign trail. And, just this week, Senator McKinney and Larry Cafaro said they're going to resist any new taxes. I mean, that must be frustrating. I mean, you haven't even started the job and you're already getting pushback. Well,
listen, I've been in politics for a period of time. I've been in government for a period of time. People like to take positions obligations, even if they know that they're untenable. I refused to say that I was going to take anything off the table. The members of the media put me under tremendous pressure. My opponent put me under tremendous pressure. I was not going to change my position. Everything's on the table. Everyone's invited to the table. We're going to find a way out of this. It may take us more than a single year to undo the damage that's been done, but we begin by telling the truth, which is generally accepted accounting principles.
What is the budget deficit when you apply generally accounted?
Well, you know what? Since we don't have the budget and since we don't have access to the budget, I can't tell you exactly what that is. We know it's at a minimum $3.4 billion. It's probably in excess of that. GAAP would also require that you fund your long-term obligations in an appropriate fashion, which the state has not done. It's that portion which adds to the yearly operating deficit. But GAAP also says that you can establish a plan by which you'll meet those obligations, and that's what we're going to do.
Would the legislature actually have to pass something in order to implement GAAP? Because Governor Rell, you've said you're going to implement it by an executive order. Governor Rell blamed the legislature for not passing it for 10 years.
I'm going to do two things. I'm going to sign an executive order on January 5th that requires all state agencies, commissions, and departments to report to me under GAAP. And I have taken the pledge, and I mean it. I will sign no budget in the spring of the coming year until the legislature has passed legislation that requires the state to do all of its future reporting under generally accepted accounting principles. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if it balloons the deficit. We're going to start telling the truth to the people of Connecticut, and the governor and the legislature are going to start telling the truth to one another.
When I worked in the legislature, this came up every session, but it always was pushed aside because it made the job of getting a budget so much harder, because in all honesty, without using GAAP, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. You already have an incredibly tough task. Is it doable?
Yeah.
Let me put you on hold. We're going to come back after the break and get your answer for that.
There you go.